So basically, like, you want to do, like, in other words, if you're teaching, if you want people to understand how to rotate the arm externally in the shoulder, right? Is it easier to teach me how to do that in Uttita Hastasana, or is it easier to teach me how to do that in downward dog? Of course, right? So you have to really consider these things when you're sequencing your classes. Like, if that's something that you really want to teach people, then you have to figure out what pose can I teach that in an easier way before I teach it here. That makes sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah? Okay. That's why, too, we do child's pose before downward dog, because we can really instruct in an easier way what the arms are doing prior to going into downward facing dog. Once you get people in downward facing dog and you start trying to talk about what the arms are doing, it's a lot harder. Yeah?
Will we review all the possible injuries that students can have? Like when you first start class, you ask if there's any injuries, and person tells me, oh, I have a hip replacement. Will we go through that? What to do with those
not in really great detail. I mean, you learn more of that in the 300 hour. There's a whole section on injury management. Okay, you know, also, you know, in order to teach, like at YogaWorks, you have to have 500 hours to go through the 200 and the 300 hour. Mm-hmm. So you get much more of that, like in the 300 hour. There's a lot of places where you can teach at 200 hour levels, but it really behooves you to get more training.
But now you just have to think that, okay, you're not a doctor. Nobody's not gonna, think that you know everything. So if somebody's gonna come to you and say a crazy name that you never heard about, that injury in the shoulder, you just have to know that, okay, there's an injury in the shoulder. You have to just know what poses are dangerous to the shoulder. You know,
so we'll go through that, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, exactly. Like if somebody comes into your center and said, I just had rotator cuff surgery. Like I just had a surgery to my rotator.
So you can go home now and rest.
Yeah. No, but that person should know what they can and cannot do. Somebody comes into your class and just had a hip replacement surgery, you know, that's kind of extreme. They should know because they should have been through physical therapy, okay, and they should have been informed by their doctors what they can and cannot do at this point. And you need to just ask them to say, you know, are you in physical therapy? Have you talked to your doctor about what you can and cannot do? Yes. Okay, great. Do you know how to modify certain things for yourself? Yes. Okay, great. Or are they saying no? And then you might want to say, you know, depending on what the level of the class is, if they come to a level 2 good, you might want to say, you know, you might want to go to a lower level class as you're recovering from this surgery, this injury. People are ridiculous. Seriously, like I had a guy come to my class that had a really bad skiing accident, and he had stitches in the back of his head, and like came into my class late. You know, so this is the other thing you want to. This is why it's important to get to your classes early, so you can have conversations with people and really get to know them, what's going on for them. So he came into class late, and I was doing shoulder stand at the end of class, and I saw him like kind of, you know, sort of like muffling about like in the back of the room. So I went back, and I was like, you know, I said, hey, you know, and I went over to him a couple of times, like, you know, talked to him, and because he was new to my class, but he didn't tell me anything was going on. Like, are they, you know. So he said, yeah, you know, I just had a ski accident, I got stitches in the back of my head. I said, don't go into shoulder stand. I didn't say it like that, but I was just, you know, I didn't want to freak him out, but I just said, this is not the best pose for you to be doing right now. Okay, so he said, come down, and I'm show you. Like, and so a lot of times it's really going to be that obvious to you, not so obvious to somebody else. So, you know, all the time. So you just have to like, you know, if somebody has a major head injury that they just had, they're not going to go upside down for today. So it's like a lot of it is just basic knowledge, okay? And whatever you don't know, you just say, listen, I really don't know. And so please just don't do anything that hurts for today. That's all. That's the best that you can do. You know, because it's also up to that person to take responsibility for whatever their injury is and whatever they have going on. You can't take all the responsibility, okay? It's that person's responsibility too to really be informed with their injury and what they should and shouldn't be doing, and be in communication with their doctors. Okay.
There's a big rule: don't do anything that costs you money. But you have to, you know, teach your students what is different thing when you're stretching your thighs and you hold your Utkatasana, the pain on your, the burning pain, the pain on your thighs. That's work on your thighs, right? Some students, especially beginners, they confuse the pain of whatever, injury pain and pain of working hard. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is very.
Yeah, and some people just don't have that kind of sensitivity to pain. Some people like have no sensitivity to that. But, so we will go into a little bit of the non-big detail because we, you know, and that's something that we have later for the next program. But flip to page 45, okay, where it says breakdown of yoga work sequence. This is what I want to look at now just to finish up with this for today. Is that this is your general breakdown of the sequence. Every time, so for your homework assignments, when you're to write a sequence, in your exam at the end, you're going to be writing a sequence, you need to follow this template. This is your template right here, right at the top. Yoga work sequence falls into 6 basic sections. Number 1 is the opening, number 2 is sun citations, number 3 is standing poses, number 4 is a peak part of the class, 5 is a cool down, and 6 is shavasana. Okay? We're going to talk in so much more greater detail as to what is in each of these parts. Okay? But I think most of you have a general idea just from being in classes, kind of what is in those areas. Okay? So obviously, you know, part of the reason why we do standing poses up at the beginning is because the standing poses are really sort of what we call a targeted warm-up, where you're targeting very specific areas or what we call component parts of the body. Those can be component parts of the body or component actions that you are wanting to emphasize going forward into your sequence, okay? Because you can't, so it's sort of like you can't do all standing poses. So what standing poses are the best standing poses for me to do today based on what it is that I'm creating in my sequence? Your peak part of your class is basically, that's your hardest part of your class. That's where you're going to be doing your harder back bends, arm balances, and inversions, and you can write that in there. The peak part of your class is where you're doing, mostly going to be doing your harder back bends, inversions, and arm balances. It's the hardest part of your class. Okay? The cool down is simply that. It's just you're winding down for Shavasana. So generally the cool down is where you're going to have most of your seated poses, where you're going to be doing supine or, you know, you're going to be doing reclining poses like lying down or seated. So seated or lying down, some variation thereof. Sort of depends on what you did prior, okay? And then Shavasana. And we can talk a little bit more also just, you know, and this just takes time with teaching. It's like how much time for each of those sections, you know? And it really depends on if it's an hour class, an hour and a half class, or, okay? What do you suppose is in the opening? What's in the opening?
Talk about something.
Yeah, that's what I do. Yeah. I have to talk about butterflies and flowers, yeah. Yeah. I usually like to have a little chat at the beginning of my class, where I usually read something or set some kind of an intention or thoughtfulness to the practice or to the class. Some teachers chant. I like chanting. I often chant at the beginning of my classes. Some teachers like to say nothing and do nothing and maybe just have like meditation at the beginning of class. Or do some type of breath awareness, or, you know, it's something that's going to help bring people together and center them a little bit before you start.
That's Ujjayi.
Yeah, you could do some like we did this morning, you know, a little meditation, Ujjayi breathing. Okay. Okay, so just looking at the time here. Okay, I'm going to have you do a little exercise together, okay? So break into 2 groups, but somebody that you haven't worked with yet, okay? And turn in your teaching tools manual here to the section that says worksheets and unscrambles. Flip to that page, page 83. Partners, yeah. Oh, just partners.
Yes.
80? Oh. It should say simple standing pose unscramble at the top. You see that? Okay, good. So what you're going to do now is you're going to put these standing poses in order based on what we just talked about. In terms of easier before harder, externals before neutrals, okay, that type of thing. So what you might want to do with each other first is determine what poses in that list are external and what are neutral. And also determine of the neutral poses, are they hard neutrals? And what I mean by hard neutrals, are they asymmetrical or are they symmetrical? If they're symmetrical neutrals, that means that they don't necessarily have to go after the externals. Like Tadasana. Tadasana. Right? So that should be first on your list, obviously. I'm just giving you away. Okay? All right, so go ahead. This is not like a class, obviously. This would just be like your standing pose section of your sequence. Okay? So go ahead.